recalibrate the discomfort as a life issuing you an invitation to grow in who you are, into set a new course, in new chapter, into becoming a bigger version of yourself, to creating a bigger version of the life that you have within you to live. And so often we treat discomfort as a danger sign, like, oh, this is terrifying, I have to retreat. And actually, that discomfort is a signpost that's pointing you toward growth. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean you're going to love it and go, woohoo, I love packing up the boxes, or I love stepping away from a situation where it was just so wholly familiar and everyone knew my name. It means that the cost of staying where you are is exceeding the discomfort of pursuing something new. And so change is going to happen whether you like it or not. But are you actively participating in changing in your life? Welcome to the Live Brave podcast. I'm Margie Warrell. Here you'll learn how to live and lead with more courage in an increasingly anxious world. If you'd love to bring your bravest self to your biggest challenges and the boldest vision for your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hello there and welcome back to the Live Brave podcast. I'm excited that you're joining me today because I want to talk about your relationship with change. Having just visited the pyramids in Egypt a few weeks back, I was struck how these monuments that were built to defy time still couldn't stop time marching on. They were left there for ruins. Some of them got covered in sand. The Sphinx was covered in sand for thousands of years because people forgot about it, even though it was this extraordinary structure. I saw this boat at the new Grand Museum of Egypt that was about 100 foot long, and it had been buried for 3,500 years in the mud. It's why the cypress that it was made from endured so long, because of the conditions that it was buried in. I share that with you because we human beings have this competing tension inside of us. One part of us wants to grow and wants to learn and wants to experience many things. And yet another part of us feels deeply threatened by change, clings on to the status quo and onto permanence. And when we're confronted with things that aren't the way we'd like them to be, when we're facing change in some way, maybe it's kids growing up and looking at leaving home and people becoming what I call a free bird, others call an empty nester. That it can be incredibly confronting to the identity, particularly of mums, when we've spent so much of our time. For those who've maybe been full-time focused on kids, it can even be more confronting to our sense of identity. Who am I if I'm not spending all my time on my kids? If you're in a job and maybe you're dealing with a potential restructure, maybe Gen AI is looking like completely turning your role and what you do, and maybe even your actual, position, your job security on its head. That can be immensely threatening to us. Likewise, just every day we're dealing with situations that mean that we have to deal with change. And so our relationship with change has a profound impact, not just on our moment by moment experience of life, but on the emotions that we bring to it, on the actions we take or don't even think to take. And then, of course, on the future that we're living into. And so I just want you to think about, what's your relationship with change, and where does, even at an unconscious level, your fear of what change might require or might demand you letting go of, you losing, keep you from leaning in, from embracing it, from even pursuing it actively? Change, even change for the better, can be incredibly threatening to our sense of safety, to our sense of certainty, to our sense of status and belonging. And so often when we talk about change, it's actually our sense of self that can feel really threatened. It's why we sometimes cling to the things that give us a sense of status and certainty and belonging, to past successes and glories. to the strengths that got us to where we are, and we double down and we triple down. If I keep doing more of what got me here, that's going to shore up that I don't lose my place. And yet it can keep us putting energy into things that don't set us up to thrive in the future. Over the last year or so, have dealt with a lot of change. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of change over my adult life ever since I left home at 18 and moved to a big city to go to university. I had dealt with relatively little change in my first 18 years growing up on my mum and dad's dairy farm. But ever since then, I feel like my life has been constant change. And I have not enjoyed all of it. I haven't chosen all of it. Some of it was sort of semi-thrust upon me. Some of the big global moves when my husband, was voluntold, we want you to move to this state or this country, this continent, which got harder and harder as my kids got older. And of course, you always have a choice, but weighing up the options is like, we need to do this. It's the best thing in the bigger picture. That didn't mean it was easy. In fact, sometimes it was incredibly, not only disruptive from a family perspective, but in terms of my own identity. And I remember it was actually 14 years ago as I record this week, because it just popped up on my Facebook. 14 years ago today, you were packing up your home in Hardison Lane, McLean, Virginia, and we flew across the world to Melbourne, Australia. And my oldest was nearly 14 and setting up life in a whole new city, country. Even though I was an Aussie, I hadn't lived in Melbourne for a long time, and I certainly hadn't had school-age kids there before. And so I remember walking through the school that my sons went to, Brighton Grammar, on the first week, and walking along, and no one knew me. And I'd gone from being really embedded in a community in McLean where everyone knew me. I had 4 kids at a school, and suddenly I was a nobody. No one knew who I was. And I remember that feeling pretty like, I didn't enjoy it. It was like, no one knows me. And I share that story because sometimes when we're looking at change, it's like the unknown is a little scary and it's unsettling, but it's also, who am I if I no longer have this life, this set of circumstances, these people responding to me, interacting with me in a certain way? Who am I if I don't have this job or this title or this address? And so I just invite you to think about, what is it that sometimes keeps you from pursuing change, from saying yes to things, and from letting go the familiarity of the old. So I got 3 little suggestions for you to make sure that you are seizing the opportunities that change holds. And the first one of those is to just ask yourself, what is it that you're resisting? Like, don't be vague here, be specific. Like, what is it that feels so uncomfortable? Maybe it's not actively threatening to you, but there's something about it. It's like, I won't know anyone. I won't know where to go to get my hair cut. I know, having moved tree, and suddenly you've got to start all over again with everything. It's like, I can feel a lot. I don't know if I've got what it takes. I don't know if I'm too old for this. I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to find my people again. But what we resist persists. What we push down grows in power. And so when you can just shine the light on it and name it, when we name the things that we're afraid of, when we can just see it in the full light of day, it often helps loosen the grip that our fears hold on it. It's like, you know what? I can do this. At least I'm looking at it now, versus it kind of being unconscious in the background. Second, ask yourself, what is it that you're afraid of losing? Is it your sense of belonging? Is it your sense of status? Is it your sense of the familiar? Like, you just know everything about where you are. I know in jobs, when we step away from a role, or when we say we're going to go and do something new, it's like, everything's new, and that can be really overwhelming. So the fear of losing that familiarity, that comfort, that place, that can trigger a lot of fear. But again, just identify what it is you're afraid of losing and know that our brains are twice as likely to focus on what we could lose versus what we could gain. As Daniel Cunningham wrote in Thinking Fast and Slow, and his research found we are twice as sensitive to potential losses over potential gains. And so that fear of loss often really clouds our judgment, and it also limits and narrows our thinking. And we can't even see all the options that are out there because we're afraid. We're in this fear mode. We're focusing on what we don't want, on what we could lose versus what we do want and what we could gain. And as I wrote in the courage gap, what you focus on expands. So even positive change requires letting go of something. And even though we might know we want to do it, it still can be triggering. I remember several years ago, a woman I knew, I knew her, she was a friend of my mum's. And she said, she reached out to me one time. She said, Margie, I've been reading your Live Bravely newsletters. Yes, and here's a little shameless plug. If you don't get my newsletter, jump on my website, subscribe. She said, I've been reading your newsletters and I read your book, Find Your Courage, my very, very first book, and your book, Brave. And she said, and I know I need to leave my marriage. And I never want to be encouraging anyone to leave a marriage, certainly not lightly. I believe strongly in the vow of marriage, but sometimes there's circumstances in which one party is just not willing to go on the growth journey, isn't willing to do the work. And she said, I have tried so hard and I just feel so alone in this marriage. I feel my life is just my whole future. I look at it and it's just incredibly she said, it leaves me in a place of almost despair. Like that's the rest of my life. And she said, and I know I need to leave this marriage, but I know it's going to crush my husband. And she said, but I just feel like I have to do it. And I said, well, if that's how you feel, then, you have to do what you have to do. And then I bumped into her about a year later. And she came up to me. I was actually in a bakery ordering a coffee. And she said, Margie, I have to tell you right now, I'm actually in the process of packing up the boxes. And it is the hardest thing I have ever done. It is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I know I can't not do it. And I want to say thank you. But right now I am just in the hardest of moments. And she got a little teary and I gave her a hug. And I was actually with one of my sisters and she looked at me and she goes, did you just end her marriage? I'm like, don't put that on me. No, I did not. But did I help her get present to what it was going to cost her if she's stuck with the status quo? Yeah, I'll own that part. And of course, that's why I do what I do, help people get present to what it will cost them if they stick with the path that feels the safest and most comfortable right now. And so for you, yes, even change for the better isn't always easy. And it requires sometimes stepping away from something that is incredibly safe and certain and familiar. And the gravitational pull of the status quo can be immensely strong. And yet, what does it cost you if you don't heed that siren call of your own heart, of your own soul, of what you know to be true? And third, recalibrate the discomfort as a life issuing you an invitation to grow in who you are, and to set a new course, a new chapter, into becoming a bigger version of yourself, to creating a bigger version of the life that you have within you to live. And so often we treat discomfort as a danger sign, like, oh, this is terrifying, I have to retreat. And actually, that discomfort is a signpost that's pointing you toward growth. Doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean you're going to love it and go, woohoo, I love packing up the boxes, or I love stepping away from a situation where it was just so wholly familiar and everyone knew my name. It means that the cost of staying where you are is exceeding the discomfort of pursuing something new. And so change is going to happen whether you like it or not. But are you actively participating in changing in your life? Are you actively pursuing the opportunities, the situations, the circumstances, the experiences that will help you change and grow in positive ways? It's funny having just been back in Egypt because I was there 30 something years ago as a young backpacker. I'd graduated uni. I was spending time with just a few traveler's checks and a really bad backpack, traveling around the world. And I traveled all over the Middle East, well, not all over it, but traveled around Egypt and Jordan and Israel, but also the Sahara Desert and Morocco and into Niger and Nigeria. And so it was a pretty intrepid trip. And I remember actually crossing the Sahara Desert in Algeria. And we were going through really remote areas of Algeria and these just vast sand dunes that are hundreds of meters high. And what I found fascinating is that every year they move by a few feet, and the Sahara Desert takes up a little bit more land. It moves ever so slowly, but it moves. And I remember one time we were passing by what had been clearly some Tuareg Bedouin village, and the remnants of a mud brick house was still there. You could see that the houses had been filled with sand over the previous decades. And there was this man sitting in front of this house that was largely filled with sand. It didn't even have a roof, and he just sat out the front of it. And there was a nearby oasis, like somewhere where they could still get some water. So, because I was like, how does he even exist? Because believe me, there wasn't any running water, no creeks, no rivers for hundreds of miles. Then I thought, there is a man who is resisting change. His home is being overtaken by sand, and yet he sits there still, resisting change. He will not move. He will not move to where he could inhabit and have a better life. And sometimes people do that. They're so resistant to change that they just sit and suffer versus lean in, because in the end, we suffer so much more when we let our fear dictate our actions than when we say, it's time. It's time for me to pursue something new, to go after something bigger, to let go that familiarity, that certainty, even that lovely everyone knowing your name, experience. And if you're moving somewhere new or moving to a new job. And so for you, where are you being invited to step toward change? Where are you being called to take a step towards something different? Where are you being called to let go the familiarity of the old and to try something new? And more to the point, what will it cost you if you do not heed that call to courage and move toward change? As Charles Darwin once said, those who are going to survive are not always the most intelligent, but they're the most willing to change. They're the most adaptable to change. That isn't comfortable, but change always, when we lean into it, holds growth for us. I hope you will step towards something new, because courage is what it's required to thrive in life. And I know that you have all the courage that you need to thrive, to adapt, to learn something new, and to grow into a bigger version of yourself. And of course, if you have yet to read The Courage Gap, which helps you do just that, I hope you will pick up a copy. And I also hope, if you are looking at really making some big changes for yourself, or you're not even sure where to start, check out my upcoming retreat with the Modern Elder Academy, Courage is Calling, Reset on Your Bravest Path, and my LinkedIn learning course that just went live. And finally, please rate, review, share this podcast. It helps the algorithms, and I hope that it will help more people to live and lead more bravely and to pursue the change that is required to live our best lives. Take care.